So have you ever had a hero in life?
Oh, yeah.
Who's your hero?
Well, you'll be right now if you go get me another beer. Hello and welcome to the darkened room of music conversation. Tonight we're going to talk about our album addictions. Ooh. I'm Chris.
And I'm Darren. And hey, before we get going too much further, do you have another one of those? I'd sure like one.
No, it's my last one. You want this?
No, I plan on performing tonight as an adult male.
Okay. Uh-huh.
All right. Well, hey.
Suit yourself.
Yeah, back to the reason why we're here. We're going to be talking about kind of another episode about our little journey in music and, our beginnings a little bit. And we've done, prior episodes where we hit on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want to talk about the albums that maybe we heard the most, we just couldn't get enough of, we were addicted to at various points in our life. And I decided that I brought a few props along and we'll just kind of discuss it, kind of my little musical journey here. Feel free to jump in and then you can do the same.
All right, props, huh?
A few props.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carrot Top.
All right.
Kidding.
Up first, right here, you've heard me talk about this artist, this album many times. This is the actual album that I grew up listening to. The very first thing that I loved musically in my entire life was this right here. Glenn Campbell, Rhinestone Cowboy. We're talking as a 5-year-old tyke. Couldn't get enough of that. And that kicked this whole musical love best off.
Yeah.
A couple years later, I really got into this right here, which was the Discovery album by ELO.
Great album.
Yeah. Don't Bring Me Down. A lot of great stuff on this, man. I wore it out. And one of the things I wanted to hit on was, when you're a kid and your musical titles are limited, you tend to listen to them over and over and over again.
Right, yeah.
And because you don't have a whole lot of options.
Yeah.
So that introduced me to ELO, but that grew into a humongous lifetime of love for ELO.
Yeah.
And then, eventually I got records like this, which I just couldn't get enough of. Out of the Blue, this is a double album. Of course, it had a Sweet Talking Woman on here, Mr. Blue Sky, all the great, just a great record, hitting on all cylinders at this point.
Yeah.
1977, just a great release. And man, I was addicted to that album like you wouldn't believe. But it came later, when I had the money to go out and get this stuff and explore it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you kind of see what I'm saying.
Sure, absolutely.
The next big group that I really got into, and I would say that this is when I turned into a real true music fan.
Yeah.
Was Hall & Oates. And my format of choice at that time would have been cassette. So these guys right here, Private Eyes, man, wore that out. Prior to that, the Voices record, I had the singles off that, like You Make My Dreams and You've Lost That Love and Feeling and Kiss on My List. I had those on 45.
Yeah.
But when I got these full albums, I couldn't get enough of them.
Yeah.
My buddy Neil Kernan produced this one too, H2O, which is just glorious. And, Man Eaters on here, and Family Man, still one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
One on One, what a tremendous vocal on that song.
Yeah.
It's a great record. The deep cuts on here are really good. And this cassette right here, which was the original cassette I had way back when in the 80s, wore it out, man.
Yeah.
Just wore it out. And then this one, I'd be remiss if I didn't even bring this one up too. This is Big Bam Boom.
I had this on cassette too.
You had that also.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Does this have the remixes of Out of Touch on it? Aha.
Yep.
Yeah. I listened to this one quite a bit.
Yeah.
Didn't make my list, but it's definitely one of those that I got addicted to. And me being the mixtape guy I am, what I would do in my dual cassette is I would record Dance on Your Knees.
Love it.
And then at the break, at the beginning of Out of Touch, I'd hit pause, I'd flip it over to the remix side, and then start it up with the drum beat.
You had your own
thing.
remix.
I had my own remix.
Very
It was Dance on Your Knees all the way into the whole remix.
I would say, it's funny, this memory just hit me. I would say the anticipation I had for new Hall & Oates when this came out was like a big moment for me. That was probably the first time that I was like, oh my goodness, they're coming out with something I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
And I heard Out of Touch, and it just like kicked my ass.
Yeah.
And I still think it's a great song. Method of Modern Love, when that came out, I mean,
that was a great one, yeah.
I listened to those things endlessly. Not long after that, I kind of turned my attention towards hard rock and some heavy metal. This guy right here, my original Journey Escape tape.
Yeah.
Can't even tell you how many times I'll listen to this thing, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to it so much, the dropouts in it, I knew where they were. and I still hear them in my brain when I hear the song.
Yeah.
If I concentrate. But yeah, I love me some Journey. That was probably the first band that I absorbed as a whole band. Like, ooh, there's the guitar player, Neil, and the drummer, Steve, and Steve Perry, the singer, you know. I really got to know the individual band members, and that was a big development for me. You know, a big step up in my musical knowledge. I really started paying attention to, you know, who was doing what on records. And you know, a few years later, this came out, Raised on Radio, and I have to say, this is a record that I listened to endlessly. When I was in high school, I listened to it all the time, and I think it's a really good record.
I had that one on cassette myself. I loved the whole thing. Yeah,
I think it's really good. And then when I was a teenager, I actually started hearing Cheap Trick, and man, there was a few years there where I just turned into a Cheap Trick fanatic, a worshiper. This record right here, when I heard it, it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Now, this record didn't sell as well as some of their other ones. I think it's their masterpiece. It was produced by George Martin, you know, from Beatles fame, of course. And it kind of has that kind of feel to it at times. He brought some orchestration along, you know, like some of the Beatles stuff, and I just love it because I love heavily orchestrated stuff, as evidenced with the Yellow and stuff. This record, man, I was all shook up by Cheap Trick. It's brilliant. I heard it so much. I can't even tell you how many times. You could name a number. As long as it's a big number, I probably listened to it. I could probably tell you for sure I listened to it that much. Also in high school, I got into Steely Dan. Now, the first thing that I had was the double greatest hits. I played that vinyl to death. Listened to it a whole lot, was addicted to that. Eventually got around to checking out their catalog. And when I heard this, the Asia album from 1977, it's one of those moments that changed my life. To this very day, I can put this on and enjoy it immensely all the way through. An album that was an addiction for sure. Would just put it on repeat and listen to it over and over. Hear different stuff every time I listen to it. And I still think it's a masterpiece to this day. So somewhere in the mid-'80s, this came into my life, which was Mr. Welcome to the Real World. Man, I don't know how many times I listened to this. It was endless in the summer of '86.
I have to hold the cassette because I had it on cassette too. And I'll get to why I say had. I'll get to that when I get to my list. So.
You just keep drinking. I'll keep talking.
Fine. I'm happy with that, actually.
And in the mid-'80s, I became obsessed with a little band called Rush. And this album, I love all their discography pretty much, but this album, the Power Windows album, and this version in particular, which sounds amazing. I was lucky enough early on to get the Japanese import. I listened to this more than any other Rush album. And I don't think it's their best album. It was just one of those things that just hit me at a certain point in life where I just, like you call it, I like your phrase, a warm blanket. I just gravitated to this. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, and I just wore it out, man. The mid-'80s found me listening to this over and over. My mom hated this band. She hated this record. Can we play anything else but Rush? I mean, I heard that many times.
The answer was always no, of course.
Shut up, Mom! No, I never said that. And then in the mid-'80s, went headlong into this record right here. So by Peter Gabriel. Once again, an addiction record for me.
One that I also originally had on cassette. Eventually migrated to CD. Listened to it a lot myself.
Man. And to this day, it holds up very well. I mean, it's such a great record. In the late 80s, I was way into hard rock, AOR. And I love this. This was like John Waite fronted this band. It was kind of like half Babies and half Journey. You had Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain from Journey, and you had John Waite. Jonathan Cain was also in the Babies, and then you had Ricky Phillips from the Babies on bass, and then a young guy named young at the time, Dean Castronovo on drums. Bad English. This was a record that in the summer of '89, man, I listened to it every day, literally every day. Did pretty well on the charts back then too. Listening to it now, there's some moments that's kind of lame. I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it was AOR, hard pop rock stuff aimed at mainstream radio.
Yeah.
And
I liked it too. What was the first video? Forget Me Not?
Forget Me Not. What about that chick in that video?
I loved the video.
Yeah, it was great. And a great lead-off song.
It was, yeah.
Great lead-off song. Then as we moved into the 90s, I started discovering, more hard rock that was more of the times. This album right here, man, I was in my mid-20s when this came out, Sponge Rotting Pinata. And I just listened. I was, this was a moment in my life. I had a bad girlfriend, bad relationship experience, and I really gravitated towards this record, and I listened to it so many times. And so I had to include that because it's definitely a record that I heard as much as anything I've ever listened to.
Right.
The late 90s found me digging this. The New Radicals.
Yeah.
Maybe you've been brainwashed too. Of course, everybody knows you get what you give. But the whole record is fantastic, and it's very unique. Nobody sings like Greg Alexander. Nobody writes like Greg Alexander. And
except maybe for the next one on your list there.
Well, I just mean he is very unique. Nobody can duplicate what Greg Alexander does.
Good point.
That's what I mean.
Valid point. Yeah.
And then an artist that I know that you love and that I love, and we kind of got into around the same time. And we saw him many times and listened to this album together so many times. So many road trips me and you took. We had this playing as the background music.
No kidding.
When we worked in music retail, we played it relentlessly. And that's another point I want to make. A lot of this stuff I got introduced to because I was in music retail. Some of these later albums that I'm discussing, like Sponge and New Radicals and stuff. And so when you're in music retail, you have a lot of time to listen to music because that's kind of your job.
Yeah.
And so this was one of those records that I would put on and just let it play over and over and over. And then I would leave the record store and I'd put it in my car and I'd let it play over and over and over. And I'd go home and I'd put it on my stereo and listen to it over and over and over. So you get the idea.
Yeah. And ditto.
There you go. Exactly.
That's obviously on my list as well. My all-time favorite artist for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how... There's no way I could figure out how many times I've listened to that album.
Oh, man.
So good.
It's so good. The American, of course, by Angie Aparo. It's a classic, an overlooked classic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then, I guess a couple other things I could mention in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I did listen to Matchbox 20, Yourself or Someone Like You.
Yeah?
I thought that record was just a great record at the time.
I remember you listening to that one a lot. Yeah,
it kind of got overdone, as far as like the exposure of it. And then you could almost say that maybe it influenced some bad music that came out after that. That's not their fault.
Yeah.
I kind of thought they were more like a mainstream Counting Crows and still kind of hitting on some of the post-grunge type stuff. But, for whatever reason, I really dug it at the time, and I listened to it a lot.
I will say this. I listened to Mad Season more than that album.
Yeah.
Loved that album, but Mad Season to me was more my style. It was slicker, more polished sounding.
For sure.
But the mood of the album was exactly what speaks to me.
Yeah.
So I listened to Mad Season way more than that one.
I love that one too. I like the additional edge that the debut seemed to have. And it seemed like they were a little bit more hungry on that first album, because it was their first album.
Right.
But
yep.
Outside of that, those are the albums that I could think of just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's others. Yeah. I mean, my goodness, there's thousands of records that I love.
Yeah.
But these kind of found their way to the forefront of my brain when I was thinking about this topic and the stuff that I was the most addicted to at various points in my life. Starting as a kid with Rhinestone Cowboy, all the way through Angie Aparo. These are the ones that stand out for me.
Very nice, yeah. Okay, so for my list, I don't really have any props, unless you want to count this as a prop. Hang on just a second.
Hey, that's not just a prop, that's the real deal.
Anyway, so yeah.
Rub it in. He doesn't have any other ones left for me.
But, so yeah. Darren mentioned Warm Blanket in his list. That's pretty much all my list is.
Yeah.
Like the songs that I gravitate, the albums that I gravitate to the most are Warm Blankets for me.
Yeah.
And it's at various parts of my life. And there are specific stages of my life where they meant more. And really the ones that I listened to the most came in these two different times in my life.
Okay.
Now, I do want to rewind all the way back to childhood.
All right.
And you started out with your Rhinestone Cowboy.
Sure.
My first album, actually the first album I ever begged my parents to buy for me, I was over at a friend's house. It was actually the son of the music artist that my dad played bass for at the time. Mm-hmm. He had a copy of the Muppet movie soundtrack.
Oh, man, I love it.
Yeah.
Rainbow Connection.
Rainbow Connection. I mean,
love it.
Yeah. I looked at that, I'm like, Mom, Dad, get me that. I want that. I didn't know that there was an album that had the songs from the movie. I loved the movie.
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah. That was the first album I owned.
Right.
First album my parents bought for me.
Right.
I begged them for it. And I probably listened to it, I don't know how many times throughout my whole childhood.
You remember that joke, what's green and smells like a pig?
Yeah, do we want to know the answer to that?
No.
Yeah.
Use your imagination.
So yeah, I remember so well coming out of this little thing right here on my bike. This was an AM radio, of course, so I had to listen to 1510 WLAC, which was the AM
that was
pop
the station I listened to in Nashville.
Yeah. So Rainbow Connection they played one day.
I remember hearing Do You Think I'm Sexy on there? Rod Stewart. I remember hearing Queen, We Will Rock You.
Yeah.
That station was the bomb back then, man.
So I was so excited when I heard Kermit the Frog on the radio. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that you could actually own it. So yeah, I loved that whole thing beginning to end, and I probably drove my parents nuts. So
it's funny how things like that when you're a kid just disappear one day. It's like your parents are like, I don't need to hear this anymore. Let's get rid of this. I don't know what happened to it, Chris.
Yeah, that actually,
you must have lost it.
Yeah. It did get lost at some point. Now,
did it really now?
Now, the reason I don't have props is I pretty much gravitated towards digital media.
Yeah.
You know,
and I'm a hoarder. I will admit that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really cool holding your cassettes again, because I hadn't done that in years.
Right.
It was something that I owned once.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gravitated towards the digital. I opted for convenience.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything to show you. so sorry about that.
Use your imagination.
Yeah. So that was the first album I listened to a whole lot of. I'm a more single-centric kind of guy because I like my mixtapes.
Yeah.
It wasn't until high school and my discovery of Pink Floyd and The Wall, I guess that's probably one of mine right there. The Wall. When I first heard it, I couldn't get enough of it. I was so addicted to it.
Yeah.
And all the subsequent albums I bought, Momentary Lapse of Reason, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here.
Yeah.
All of those. You've seen my Pink Floyd episode, hopefully. Yeah. So you get it. I've already talked about those.
Right.
But it led me to discover Alan Parsons and Eye in the Sky and I, Robot, a lot of his albums. I listened to those just relentlessly on repeat along with the Pink Floyd stuff. It was almost like Pink Floyd light for me. It was like it was more material that I could get into related to Pink Floyd.
It's funny how you do that too. You kind of like once you wear out your favorite band, you kind of look for those either bands that were kind of connected, the family tree, if you will. And of course, Alan Parsons, who had engineered a lot of the Pink Floyd stuff, so it did have that same sonic quality.
Exactly right. Yeah, and I also picked up on the fact that songs like "The Show Must Go On," I'm like, that's a Pink Floyd song. Like, what's he doing here?
Time.
Yeah.
Sounds
and the intro part on one of the iRobot instrumentals, it's like, that sounds like Adam Hart Mother.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, he's just kind of borrowing some of this stuff. But it was cool. I loved it. I didn't like it less because of that.
Yeah. Us and Them sounds like Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Yeah. So all of that stuff, the warm blanket, it's what I needed in my life at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, all through my teenage years, I seemed to like the stuff on the radio that had the softer, smooth feel to it anyway.
Sure.
So Pink Floyd just ramped that up, and I started paying more attention to albums that kind of had that sound. Something smoother, maybe something jazzier.
Yeah.
Sting's Nothing Like the Sun is one that, in between the Pink Floyd albums, I listened to on repeat so many times. When I first heard that beginning to end, I'm like, this is so cool. I just could not get it.
And I still think it's his best album.
It is his best album.
I really do. I think it is as well.
There are moments on the Soul Cages I think are fantastic.
Me too.
They kind of fit into that mold, but it's more of a rock version of Nothing Like the Sun.
Right.
But as a whole, Nothing Like the Sun, I still to this day I still love it.
Totally agree.
So, also not long after that, when I got into the radio business, you and I met at the college radio station, and I was starting to really get into alternative thanks to a high school friend of mine named Harper Miller.
Oh, yeah, I remember Harper. What's up, Harper?
Yeah, what's up? What's going on? Hopefully you found us here. So, he got me into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and...
he had really eclectic taste.
He had, very. James Addiction, he kind of started introducing stuff like that to me. Yeah. And so I started getting into that, but it wasn't until the one student came up and played that Concrete Blonde album, Bloodletting, got into that album, and instant addiction. Yeah. It was so good. Yeah. And I've talked about this album, of course, before. Yeah. But
it's a fantastic album, man.
Bought their other stuff and all, but Bloodletting. Love the mood of the whole thing. Yeah. So that's one that I just continuously played. Yeah. So there were other albums that I kind of gravitated towards. They weren't necessarily warm blankets, but I loved them so much I played them a whole lot. Yeah. Jesus Jones' Doubt was one of those.
I remember when you were listening to that.
Oh, yeah. I love that album. Yeah. It's very, it's got that electronic alternative kind of thing.
But an edge to it, too.
But with an edge, it was so good. Yeah, and of course the Jellyfish Belly Button album. Yeah. Yeah. I remember listening to that.
And Spilt Milk for me,
thousands of times. Yeah. Yeah. Living Colors, Time's Up. Yeah. I actually listened to way more than Vivid. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. I think it's a better record.
Yeah. So those CDs were all kind of in rotation in my CD player in my truck.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. So when you talk about an album like Concrete Blonde, when you pull it out now and listen to it?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Do you have to hear it all the way through?
All the way through. Yeah.
That's the way I am too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't pick it like with these albums that I mentioned. It's like I want to hear in its entirety.
Yeah. Bloodletting is a warm blanket in its darkness and moodiness and its depressing moments. So, yeah.
And another one that I was going to bring up that I probably forgot, and I'm assuming you listen to this a lot too. U2, The Joshua Tree.
Oh, yeah.
I listened to that. I had it on cassette.
I had it on cassette too.
Yeah. It sounded great on cassette, by the way.
And I did listen to it a whole lot back then.
Me too.
Not to the extent of these others I've named. Yeah. But, but I do know every song on that one. So I think that counts a little
Bullet the Blue Sky. That's where it's at.
That was great, yeah. So the beginning of the 90s, along comes Nirvana and all the grunge movement. Yeah. I was very single-centric at that time. I loved all of the stuff. I did love the entire album of Dirt by Alice in Chains. Right. I thought that was all great beginning to end. But doesn't qualify for kind of this addiction kind of thing. Yeah. I was addicted to that style of music, that format, that genre, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So all through the 90s and the whole alternative movement, all the way from, you mentioned Matchbox 20, and all the way up to the 2000s, I'm kind of I'm no longer really album-centric anymore. Yeah. I'm all about just absorbing as many songs from many different artists as possible. Yeah. So when 2000 came along, that's when I got into music retail. Yeah. It was around that time. It might have been 99.
Yeah, late 90s.
Yeah. So I had shelves upon shelves of stuff that I could just pop in and listen to. Yeah. And
wasn't it great?
Oh, it was great. Yeah. And when you're helping customers, you're ringing people up and all that, you're not playing one song at a time, taking it out.
Exactly.
So I started to absorb albums again.
Yeah.
So during this time, one of the albums that I really fell in love with was Dido, No Angel.
I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, I knew it from the Eminem album, of course, where he sampled it on Stan. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, there's that song. I'll let me check out the album. And I couldn't believe how good it was. Yeah. And she really had her claim to fame because of Eminem and all that. But I remember playing it all the time. And when I would see people, like the store is empty and I'm playing it, when I'd see people approaching and they're younger age, I would go to the thank you song and let it play as they walk in. And they're like, hey, that's from that Eminem song. Do you have a copy of this? And I would sell it.
Yeah, we would play that game when we worked in retail. We'd be like, we'd like look at the crowd and go, all right, I'm going to sell Earth, Wind, and Fire. Watch this. Or whatever.
It's a very high fidelity thing from the movie. Yeah.
But it worked.
It worked. And we were doing it before the movie.
Yes.
Constantly.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
I remember when Janet Jackson sampled Ventura Highway. I would put the America CD in just for that reason.
Love it. Those were fun times.
Right? It was great. So, that album, I remember driving to St. Louis to my grandparents' house with that just blasting.
Yeah.
And I timed it just right where the last track faded out as I was in their driveway.
Nice.
Yeah. And I was wondering if they could hear the bass thumping inside the house, but I had it just cranked up. So, around that time as well, I started just popping CDs in to see how I liked them.
Yeah.
One of them, of course, was Howie Day's Stop All the World Now.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with that one, too.
Yeah.
Great
record.
Yeah. I love the singer-songwriter stuff anyway. So, that one, it went beyond singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
It was the production of it, just the sonic grandness of it. It was so good.
Yeah, I agree.
It was well constructed. And the songs were the lyrics were fantastic. I loved the whole thing. And, again, all of these warm blanket.
Yeah, around that same time, too, just I want to say this real quick. Mm-hmm. Another album that kind of was like in that vein in a weird kind of way, and I thought it was really good, was White Ladder by David Gray.
Yes. I listened to that one quite a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as these others, but... I remember seeing David Gray at 328 Performance Hall.
Yeah.
It was when they were doing the Dancing in the District thing.
Yeah.
And what had happened was...
This is Nashville, by the way. Yeah. Nashville.
So, it was a free live show they would do every week, and they would invite, one big headliner and some up-and-coming artists.
Exactly.
Riverfront Park, where they had the live show outdoors, had flooded. So they moved it to 328 Performance Hall. Main act was Cowboy Mouth.
That's so weird. I remember that.
Yeah. Cowboy Mouth was the main headliner that night. And David Gray was one of the openers. He was like the second act. There was always four.
Yeah.
And no one knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And he got on stage and started playing, and I'm like, this is very interesting. I like this.
Yeah.
So I went and I found White Ladder in our store and just started wearing it out.
It was almost like a Dave Matthews approach, but with in my opinion, better songs.
Yeah.
And and a little more singer-songwriter than Dave.
Yeah. In fact, he had put out 3 or 4 albums
before that,
and was about to give up when Dave Matthews came across him and actually released White Ladder as the first album on Dave Matthews' new label.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's why I brought up Dave Disney.
Yeah. Well,
thought I'd throw you a softball.
Hey, go down this road here. Yeah.
Right.
All right, so that's one I listened to quite a bit.
Yeah.
Another one is I think our friend Scott, recommended this one to me, and boy, did he recommend a good one. He knew I would like it. He knows me all too well.
Yeah.
Matt Nathanson's "Beneath These Fireworks."
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There is some such good moments on this album. Another singer-songwriter. I love this. This guy is great live. Right. He's one of these guys that, even though this whole album is kind of melancholy, there's songs on there that are, kind of have that down mood to it. It's a little dark. But when you see him live, you would never know it. You would think that he snorted a line before he came out on stage. He had the crowd going, he had the energy going, and he loves doing covers, just sticking them in anywhere.
Yeah.
Unexpected. One night I saw him do Jesse's Girl, in the middle of one of his songs.
Nice. Love it.
One of his songs actually kind of has that same kind of riff a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's different.
Right.
But he would go into a verse of Jesse's Girl in the middle of it just to make fun of himself.
Right.
So, that's the kind of live act he is. He's fantastic.
Fun. Yeah. And speaking of Scott turned me on to a band called, that I listened to a whole lot in the late 90s, The Marvelous Three.
Oh, yeah.
Hey album. I love that record. I listened to it so many times.
Yeah.
And the main guy in that band, Butch Walker, he was actually in a metal band in the 90s called South Gang. They were like a hair metal band.
Yeah.
And that was a record that I listened to a whole lot in 99.
Butch Walker's a great talent.
Yes, he is.
He's now gone on to produce a lot of people that you've heard of. So yeah, he's great. Check him out if you've never heard him.
Right.
So probably the last album that really hit me like this was in the mid 2000s. That was I brought it up on one of my album lists or something. Death Cab for Cutie Plants.
Right.
That one I listened to beginning to end a whole lot.
I love it. At
that moment in my life, it spoke to me.
Yeah.
And it had a deep meaning for me. So that's kind of the end of my list. I didn't have the props. Sorry about that. but yeah. That's kind of my journey,
Nice.
Yeah, the stages of my life, late teens, and then that era where I was in music retail. Yeah. Those are the important points right there.
Yeah. Well, we kind of thought we would do an episode where we kind of gave you kind of like the evolution of how we started and how we became such big music fans. You guys know a lot about, if you've watched the channel, a lot about our favorite groups and artists and albums and stuff. So we thought this would be kind of a fun, off-the-cuff type thing that we could do and just kind of let you know more of another look on the inside of who we are and how we came to be. So when we make comments on music down the road, you'll be like, well, that kind of makes sense. I remember him saying blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what this is all about. But I enjoyed this, man.
I did
you
too.
had some great choices on there.
Oh, thank you. Did too, yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that you're definitely more drawn to dark stuff. And I have to say, in retrospect, most of my favorite records are of the serious variety as well.
Yeah,
so for whatever reason, those are the ones that kind of stick with you.
Yeah.
Even the Cheap Trick album that I pointed out, most of the time they're having a blast, having fun. That album is more dark and serious.
Yeah. There's something to that. Yeah.
For sure.
Thanks for watching this episode of In a Darkened Room. You can find the link to this episode's companion Spotify playlist in the description. Darren and Chris welcome your comments. You can leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Follow In a Darkened Room on Twitter to receive updates and submit your ideas for what we should discuss in upcoming episodes. Darren and Chris are also on Instagram, so give them a follow there as well. All of these links can be found in the description below. While you're there, be sure to click subscribe and ring the bell.
All right, random topic time, and it's time for trivia again.
The trivia box.
My favorite random topic
subject. It's come in mind, too.
Yeah, I like this. I like this game.
Yeah.
Okay. Mosh pit is the category on this. I don't think we've had this one before.
I don't think we have.
Yeah, okay, so mosh pit. Let's see what this question's about. All right, so it says, what Southern rock band called their album Bring It Back Alive? All right, Marshall Tucker, 38 Special, The Outlaws, or Lynyrd Skynyrd.
I'm going to say it's either That would be kind of bad if they titled a Lynyrd Skynyrd record that. And I will admit,
it would, because I was going to guess that. I'm like, that is bad taste, isn't it?
I'm not the biggest Southern rock fan, although I do like a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, what's choice A? Marshall Tucker? No, I'm gonna go with C.
The Outlaws.
That's what I'm gonna go with, but man, I'm not feeling real confident about this.
I'm gonna defer to you then, because I thought it might be Lynyrd Skynyrd until you said
it's gonna be C or D. Okay. That's a cop out, but I'm gonna go with C.
Well, let's find out. It is C, The Outlaws.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so that one. Why is that under the category mosh pit?
I don't know.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I thought we were going to heavy metal question.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. That's
Oh, wow, we got it right.
We've had a couple of these now where we're like, huh?
But hey, that's what I love about the box. Yeah. We never know what we're going to draw.
The Mick Jagger one kind of threw a sore loop, and that one as well. So.
Yeah, it's like reaching your hand into a box of snakes. You never know what you pull out with.
Right. Maybe one less finger. Who knows? All right, thanks for joining us for this episode, guys. We'll be back with another one soon. Take care.
See ya.
When 2000 came along, there it is. Thanks a lot.
You had to get it out.